think last week was our spiciest episode. I think we can agree on that, right?
It was. It was. And then followed by probably the spiciest week of NFL football that we may have ever lived through, ever.
Yeah.
Other than maybe like a crazy playoff weekend, but this might even take the cake.
Yeah, I had a couple follow-ups from last week as well. The first was on the transfer portal. Our boy Jay Fry, I don't know if you saw this, had a brilliant idea that I think we could maybe get behind. He said that if you're a college football player when I'll add this caveat of in D1, FBS football, when you commit to a school and enroll and start there as a freshman, you're given like one get out of jail free card of you can transfer once. But then if you transfer a second time, regardless of where you go, you have to sit out for a year.
I think that's a great idea.
I think I can get behind that. Then you prevent, so-and-so from committing somewhere and then committing somewhere else to try and get the starting job somewhere else and then failing to do that and then committing somewhere else again for a third time. And it's just like, all right, come on. Let's
not only
stop
that, I think it would actually get people to think about a decision before they just jump in.
Exactly. Or what looks flashiest on Instagram or who's giving me the most money.
Yeah.
So I think we can get behind that. I can get behind that for sure. That was a great idea. Our man Jay Fry of IndyCar coming up with solutions to college football as well. And then the other thing was obviously about the central theme of our episode, which was tanking versus playing for the wins and enjoying yourself. And I think you alluded to the fact that I was grifting on Twitter by only posting the poll that you had asked for amongst the Bears fans, which I felt like was appropriate because it was a question geared about the Bears.
Fair.
And so I wanted a Bears fans perspective because I didn't want any members of toxic fan bases weighing in just to skew the results. Not saying who in particular.
You know who I'd be curious to hear from on stuff like that? Is teams like the Lions probably aren't a great example anymore because they actually are showing some promise this year. But some of these teams that, I know you've said the Bears haven't had a ton of success over the last decade, which is true. But at least you guys have won a division and made the playoffs on a few occasions. I would be curious to hear from some of these teams that haven't even sniffed the playoffs since the last decade. Or if their fans are just so, yeah, whatever, we don't care.
Yeah, and I will say, I was looking into it further to see kind of what other personalities were saying about the Bears, and your boy Big Cat is full on tank. So
I know he is.
So you like to say that I have the loser's mentality. I really think every Bears fan right now is in the same mindset of there is no point in winning.
But he has also said he would have liked to have won one or two games towards the end of the season because just to prove a point to the team, hey, it's progress. But
I think losing by 5 to the
digress.
Eagles is as much of a point as we could prove, to be honest, without winning. That's
Fair.
the best team in the NFC, and we were hanging with them all day. We led for a little bit. Jalen Hurts has 5 interceptions on the year, and 2 of them were on Sundays. So I was that, you say, if you're not winning, then what's the point? It's to me, watching us lose by 5 to the Eagles was more satisfying than some of the wins I've witnessed over the last couple of years.
I was rooting for the Bears so hard on Sunday. You have no idea. One, because I still am not on the Eagles hype train. It's been a struggle bus for me to fully get on board. Maybe it's just because Jalen Hurts hasn't actually done it on the stage, so to speak, in the playoffs or in a super critical, got to win this game to win the division or get in the playoffs or what have you. Although their defense and offensive lines are incredible. So that was one reason I'm just not on board with the Eagles hype train, so I wanted to see them get humbled. And secondly, just because I thought it would be funny if the game the Bears did win was against the best team in the NFL. And just, what a conundrum that would put everybody in. I just thought it would have been a hilarious paradox.
I'm watching the pregame here for the Packers. I just saw a couple fans do a shot ski. That looks like a fun time. Looks really cold, though. Yeah, I think beating the Eagles would have set the NFC into chaos. Although the Eagles only need to win one of their last three now to clinch the NFC home field advantage, which is pretty sick. So, yeah, it was cool. It was a lot of fun to watch Justin have his big run and a couple really good throws. Our defensive line didn't look half bad. Our offensive line looked horrible, which is to be expected because the Eagles have a pretty good defensive line. But, yeah, Justin went out for a little bit. Looked like he was dehydrated, so needed to get some fluids, had some cramps. And then it just came out that Jalen Hurts, so I saw him hurt his shoulder in the game, but he was able to play through it. But they just came out and said his status for Saturday, because it's Christmas Eve Saturday, so a majority of the games are on Saturday this week. His status is in doubt for that big game against Dallas, so that's going to be interesting to see if he plays through that.
Too bad Dallas didn't win this week, so it would have been more meaningful.
So before we move on to that, well, you said that you were rooting for an Eagles loss. I normally don't root for other teams unless it's a team playing the Packers in the playoffs or just a team I don't want to see win. I was such a Denver Broncos fan on Sunday because I'm like, they have a couple winnable games left, and one of the ones that I circled, especially after Kyler Murray went down, was their game against the Cardinals on Sunday, and lo and behold, the Broncos won by 9. And so we had this whole tank discussion last week. I failed to take into account that when we were looking at the updated draft rankings, that the Broncos hadn't had their loss from last Sunday registered. So I thought the Bears were in the number 2 slot. But it turns out the Broncos were in the number 2 slot because their strength of schedule is easier than the Bears. And so when they tie, that's what goes to the tiebreaker. So
Gotcha.
Now that the Broncos have won, they now have 4 wins, and the Bears have 3. So now the Bears are in sole possession of the second place in the draft. So if the Bears lose out, so the Bears they host Buffalo, go to Detroit, host the Vikings. And I am very glad the Vikings won on Saturday because I need the Vikings to maintain some sort of incentive to actually win that last week when they come to Chicago. Because if they have nothing to play for and they put out all of their backups, that would be bad news for Chicago.
So I should have the NFC standings up in front of me. So let's just say the Vikings win out and the Eagles win out, maybe lose to the Cowboys. Would the Vikings just be playing for the second or third seed at that point?
Well, let me pull up the nifty ESPN.
I guess it depends what the Cowboys do, too.
The playoff machine. Have you ever used this?
Yeah, I have.
So let's just theoretically say the Packers win tonight, right? So if we're talking the major, I'm not going to do everybody. Let's just talk the major contenders for playoff contention in the NFC. So let Detroit at Panthers next week. Probably going to go ahead and give that to Detroit. Saints I guess the Saints are somewhat of a contender just given the division. Saints at Browns. I guess I don't want to reveal too much with our predictions not made yet. I'll say Browns probably are going to win that. Seahawks at Chiefs. Chiefs are going to win. Giants at Vikings. So that does have some pretty important implications, especially after New York's win last night over the Commanders, which I think elevated their chances to make the playoffs to 75%. Still going to go with the Vikings, but I think New York gave themselves some wiggle room with their win. So the Vikings now would still be in second. Eagles at Cowboys. Let's just say for the sake of argument the Cowboys win. 49ers beat the Commanders. I'll defer to your judgment on Packers at Dolphins.
I would say it depends how the team looks tonight. That one could truly go either way. I have a feeling the Dolphins are going to put up a ton of points at home on Christmas Day, though.
If I asked a fan from the other 31 fan bases, I think they would say the Dolphins. So let's just, for argument's sake, say the Dolphins.
I'm leaning towards the Dolphins.
Buccaneers at Cardinals. I've seen stranger things, but I'm pretty confident the Buccaneers can at least get that one, hopefully.
I don't know. They lost to P.J. Walker and the Panthers.
That's true. They did turn the ball over 5 straight possessions in the second half yesterday, which is astounding. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. But 1 second here. I'm going to just churn through a couple of these. Vikings at Packers, second to last week. Probably Packers, you think? Or we were saying that the Vikings won out. So let's just pretend the Vikings went out.
Give it to the Vikings. Yeah.
All right. Let's just pretend the Vikings went out. So, Lions at Packers last week.
Packers.
Okay.
If there's something to play for either team, that is.
Okay, so if the Vikings win out and the Eagles win 2 of their last 3, or I think we agreed if they win 1. Yes, if they just win 1 game, the Eagles have the first seed. And so if the Vikings, let's just say, so the 49ers do have the tiebreaker according to the ESPN playoff machine. So if the Vikings win all 3 of their games, they get the number 2 seed. If they win 2 of their 3 and the 49ers win out, it appears the 49ers get the 2nd seed. The 49ers have hosting Commanders at Las Vegas, hosting the Cardinals. I like their chances to win out.
Well, and truly, I think the other thing you have to look at is seeding isn't only going to matter from a standpoint of if the Eagles lose in the divisional round, who then gets home field in the NFC Championship game, but also who do you not want to play in the first round?
Right, because
ultimately, because let's say the Lions went out and they make the playoffs and they're red hot. You really think the Vikings are going to want to play a divisional team, and whatever scenario would present itself? I'm sure they would do whatever they could to not play the Lions.
Right. So the way it stands now is if the Lions win out and the Giants win 1 of their last 3 and the Commanders win 1 of their last 3, then it would be Giants at 49ers, which is a favorable matchup for the 49ers. Mm-hmm. And then, again, assuming that Minnesota loses 1, it'd be Detroit at Minnesota. Which would be hilariously entertaining because something's got to give with those two. I mean, I know the Vikings beat the Saints a couple years ago in the playoffs, but you're talking about one of the most feudal franchises in the playoffs ever, going against a team that has been on fraud watch all year long. And I don't know, that would be a really intriguing one in my opinion.
I think if it comes down to Lions and Vikings in the playoffs, and then you have the Cowboys going to play the Buccaneers, I think both of those would be really intriguing games, and the team that you might think is the better team might not walk out on top.
Well, and that's another thing. So let's say, just for argument's sake, let's say the Giants somehow beat the 49ers. That means the Cowboys would go to Minnesota. It's we know how that worked already once.
Yeah.
Nobody. And the Cowboys lost yesterday, right, to the Jaguars. But with the talent level that they have on that team, I would still not want to face them if I didn't have to. And it's looking like if things play out the way they should. So let's say 2, 3, and 5 all win. That means Dallas is going to go to Philly, and that is just going to be must-see television. So the way it's lining up, these playoffs.
Oh, you're saying if they win the first round? Gotcha.
Yeah. If 2, 3, and 5 all win their first game, that means Dallas would go to Philly, and that's just going to be fantastic. So, and even the AFC is projecting to be pretty fun too, because right now the 3 wildcard teams would be the Chargers, the Dolphins, and the Ravens. Ravens are a little iffy right now. I hope Jackson can come back, but that's looking like a lot of fun too. And that 5th seed will be pretty big because that would be going to Tennessee at the moment. It could be Jacksonville if the Titans kind of mess around. But I would not want to be a team that goes to Cincy or to Buffalo right now.
If Jacksonville wins out in Tennessee, so leading into Week 18, so if the Titans lose one of their next 2 and Jacksonville wins their next 2, Week 18 will decide the division.
Right. So Jacksonville goes to the Jets. So let's say for argument's sake, Jacksonville wins. Texans go to the Titans, easy win. And then we have Jacksonville going to Houston, easy win. And the Titans play the Cowboys. That doesn't fill me with confidence. So let's just say, for argument's sake, the Cowboys win that. So, yes, if we go into the final week of the season, if the Titans win, they win the division. And if the Jaguars win, they win the division. And we talk about, what game's going to be at nighttime on that final week. If it gets to that scenario, I can guarantee that's probably going to be the Sunday night game.
Could you imagine how electric that would be?
That'd be so cool. And it's in Jacksonville. That's going to be the most alive the Jaguars stadium's been for
Since
a divisional
the AFC
round
Championship.
in a long time. Yeah. I mean, the only time a year that stadium gets any usage when they're not relevant is the Florida-Georgia game, whenever that is in October. But other than that, it's a pretty boring atmosphere. It's mostly the other team's fans. Kind of like Derek Carr had to do silent count against the Patriots, which is kind of funny. So a lot of really cool. I think it'll be a lot of fun to do this next week because then we only have 2 weeks to focus on. We could just kind of play around with the machine, but it's really nifty. I've been using the ESPN playoff machine since, when I was in high school. It's been one of my favorites. Like it comes out 6 or so weeks to go in the season every year, and I just kind of play around with scenarios. So just get to be a nerd. But yeah, like you said. So you want to hear a funny story about the Vikings game?
Yeah, how was that? I want to hear all about your experience.
That's just it. How was that? It was great. Did I know that I was going to the game until 5 minutes into the first quarter? Sure didn't. We had a friend who fell into some tickets, and we were invited 5 minutes into the first quarter. So the Colts were driving, and I can hear Sammy in the other room like, "Oh, let me ask Matt." And I'm like, "Oh, great. What thing am I about to be dragged into?" And she comes in like, "Do you want to go to the Vikings game?" I'm like, you realize it just started, right?" She's like, "Yeah, I know." I'm like, "Do we owe anything for the tickets?" She's like, "No, they're free." I'm like, "Okay, sure." So we skip on down to downtown, and
let me just interrupt. Let me just interrupt and say those look like pretty good seats too.
They were section 134, so they were super low, and yeah, we were like 18 rows up from the sideline, which was dope. I've never seen a NFL game from the lower bowl. I've always just gotten the cheapest thing I could find in the upper deck. So when we were walking in, because it's about a 30-minute drive to meet up with our friend, and then we had to Uber to the stadium. So when we showed up, Kirk Cousins had just thrown his pick six. So we were walking by the concession stand near our seats, and I could see it on the video monitor, and I could hear the grumbling in the crowd. I'm like, uh-oh, something just happened. So Kirk Cousins had just thrown his pick six. So when we sat in our seats, there was about 5.5 minutes to go in the second quarter, and it was 30-0 Colts. And I'm like, you know what? As soon as we get here, this thing is going to get turned around. They continue to struggle for the rest of the second quarter. They come out in the third quarter and go 3-and-out. I'm like, well, maybe not. maybe we weren't going to see an epic comeback. And my God, I mean, credit to the Vikings offense for balling out. Credit to the Vikings defense for getting a number of stops. Shame on the Colts offense for getting super passive and not doing anything of note in the second half. They had a couple kind of important third down conversions, but other than that, my God.
So I have to ask, it looked completely full on TV during the whole game, but did you see anyone start to head to the exits at halftime?
Oh yeah, I think not necessarily halftime. When they went 3-and-out in the start of the third quarter, you could visibly see people starting to leave. And I was like, I would maybe get it if I had like prepaid for season tickets, but like you're talking like you probably paid a lot of money to come to this game. Like just stick it out. And yeah, I'm not a Vikings fan by any stretch of imagination, but to witness that comeback in person was simply amazing. And I was telling everybody after the game about that. I was like, not a Vikings fan, but just being invited along, I was super thankful and appreciative.
Dude, that's
that.
once in a lifetime.
Yeah,
that's once in a lifetime game experience.
I had to explain it to Sammy and our friend after. I'm like, the NFL has been around since like 1920, and that was the biggest comeback in NFL history. Like, I think trying to get our heads around it was just amazing. So I still think the Vikings are frauds. They shouldn't have been in a position they were down by 33 to the Colts.
Does a comeback like that against a team like that make them more fraudulent or less fraudulent or indifferent?
Well, it's good to overcome some adversity in the season, so credit to them. I think they've slightly proven that they can overcome adversity, at least in this situation. I don't know if we have they had a good comeback against the Commanders. They had a comeback against the Patriots. They've had a couple comebacks this year. So I think, I guess we could probably say they're pretty used to adversity at this point. But you shouldn't have been down by 33 to the Colts in the first place.
Can I just say they have 2019 Packers written all over them?
Yeah.
Do you remember when the Packers got absolutely throttled by the 49ers that year?
In the regular season?
Yes. And then they finished 13-3, won the division all season long. Everyone was like, this team's frauds. But they finished 13-3 and beat the Seahawks in the divisional round, then went to San Fran and got throttled in the NFC Championship game. Like, I feel like this Vikings team has that sort of recipe written all over them. Like, if they have to go to Philly for the NFC Championship game or they have to play Dallas in the divisional round, it just seems like it's going to be ugly.
Yeah, so if they host Seattle or the Giants, I think they'll be okay. If they host the Lions, I could see that being a little nervy. And then the second round of the playoffs, if they get through, I could see that being a tough time wherever they go or whoever they host. So definitely something to keep our eyes on. I think Jeff Saturday's fate has been sealed, unfortunately, after that loss. I do not think he's going to be invited back next year. I think it's not a very talented roster, but that was inexcusable in my opinion. So, but yeah, we can move on to, let's see, Dallas. Like we said, Dallas had a 17-point lead over Jacksonville and blew that. The Jaguars tied late and then won in overtime. We aren't ready to call the Cowboys frauds, though, right?
Not full-on frauds, but they have holes.
Like their second corner. They need to get that figured out ASAP.
And I was thinking about this, too. I do think Dak's a good quarterback, but I was thinking more and more about we have not seen Dak really do it on the high stress or in the high stress moments yet either. Because the one year they had the 1 seed, they lost to Green Bay in the playoffs. And then last year when they played the Niners, they had that atrocious end of game sequence. Right. What do they do? Beat the Seahawks in the playoffs? Is that his one playoff win?
Sounds about right.
So, again, I think the Cowboys are a good team. I think they're one of the top 6 or 8 teams in the NFL. But even with Brock Purdy at quarterback, I think I would give the Niners the edge over the Cowboys just because of that Niners defense.
Yeah, you watch the game again on Thursday night when the 49ers beat the Seahawks and again go, why did they trade up for Trey Lance?
I know. It kills you.
It hurts. It hurts. I don't understand. Or, how did you miscalculate that? Because you could have traded up for Justin Fields and you still evaluated Trey Lance as being better, and that hurts. So tough. It was a weird week of football, though, because the Chiefs exclusively trailed the Texans for a majority of the game. But then they did win in overtime, so they punted. And then the elite, elusive athlete, Davis Mills, was scrambling and fumbled. Chiefs recovered, scored a touchdown. Ball game. The Chiefs were celebrating. I know they had clinched the division, but they were celebrating as if they had done something meaningful. It just goes back to, I just cannot stand Mahomes. But
that's so funny. I was talking to Michelle yesterday. I said, I thought he would wear thin on me, but he hasn't worn on me yet. I don't know.
I think you're a much nicer person than I am, though.
Well, I also look at his career, and I think I have a little bit of pity for him because I have said all along I fear his career is going to follow the Rodgers trajectory where he wins a Super Bowl very early on and everyone's like, oh, my gosh, just imagine how many championships and MVPs this guy's going to win in his career. And then he signed a $500 million contract, and his best receiver ended up in Miami. And I just fear he might be chasing Super Bowls for a long time in his career, or his second Super Bowl for a long time, especially because he's going to have to play against Josh Allen and Joe Burrow for the next decade.
Yeah, and I'm definitely – I know Aaron Rodgers is not my favorite person, but I'm not trying to take a cheap shot at him here when I say that I think two of the key differences is, one, Mahomes has a proven coach, right? I think Mike McCarthy.
100%.
Mike McCarthy, you're like, oh, God, what is he going to do this time? Or, oh, we're down by 6. Let's do 3 straight bombs and go 3 and out or whatever. So I think his coaching is much more stable. And I think the situation in Kansas City is much more stable than Rodgers has ever had. And then secondly is when I watch Mahomes play, I feel like Mahomes is leading a generation of quarterbacks that are kind of redefining the quarterback position. And I don't feel like Rodgers is an elite quarterback, obviously, and he's made insane throws throughout his career. But I don't think like what he did redefined the position per se.
So I agree on 2 of those 3 points. But why do you think Mahomes is in a better situation?
Well, I think their front office is
other than head coach.
Well, I think their front office is more sorted out. Their franchise has an owner. I'm just joking, but
hey. I got my certificate in the basement, damn it.
Yeah. Well, there is something to they did. I wouldn't say they choked in the playoffs, but, man, that second half against the Bengals last year was particularly tough to watch. So if you rack up more of those kind of losses in the playoffs, then I think people will start to go, what's going on here? They're not at that point yet, though. So I think if they can keep stacking some really good regular seasons and then not losing the playoffs in gut-wrenching fashion. So, i.e., if they get to a couple Super Bowl, like, if you get to the Super Bowl and lose, like, you can at least say, like, hey, at least we got there, which is something I think that's one thing that's really hampered the Packers over the years is not making a Super Bowl ever other than the one time. And to me, I feel like that would lead to a more stable front office, lead to less strife amongst everybody. I do wonder if the Tyreek trade is going to come back to bite him eventually. Because you're right. I think trading your best receiver when Mahomes is in his current situation is a gamble.
Well, especially because Tyreek is at like his peak right now. It's not like he was on his way down. And he was on, the last 3 or 4 years of his career, kind of like when the Packers got rid of Greg Jennings and Jordy. Not that they were as good as Tyreek by any means, but I also think I have a soft spot for the Chiefs and Bills because even though Buffalo and Kansas City are big cities, I look at their franchises as kind of the most similar to teams like Green Bay. I'll throw Chicago in there. Just those teams that have really hardcore fan bases and that are like football smart for the most part and that have really like hung with their team through thick and thin. Like I feel like there's a lot of franchises that aren't necessarily like that.
Yeah, I think people forget how bad the Chiefs were for a very good stretch there. They were pretty terrible. I mean, even the Packers and in the 80s and early 90s were
70s and 80s.
Yeah, we're particularly bad. And the Bears didn't do a whole lot in the 90s and then the early 2000s until Lovie Smith arrived. And now I think we're in another one of those like generational ruts that we'll talk about 15 years from now. Like, oh, hey, you remember the 2010s? Like, ugh. But yeah, I think Mahomes, I don't like him, but can't deny how talented he is. He's not even in the top 100 quarterbacks as far as passing completions, but he is now tied for 60th in passing touchdowns. This is insane.
That's insane.
He's going to shatter the passing touchdown record.
To see how his receivers' yards after catch compares all time.
I can't find that warehouse of data anywhere, but yeah, I wonder when they started keeping Yak as a, because sacks was until 1990 or something. So, I had another one from last week that I wanted to touch on. So we were talking about the service academies. My mother filled me in on what's the appropriate. We're talking about service academies, so I feel like the word fake news is appropriate.
Misinformation.
She said, quote, not every Naval Academy football player goes to it's called NAPS, which is their like prep school. They do training Naval in schools to get grade up, and then they can go report a day or two before, but a day or two before freshman year starts, but they do have to attend plebe summer. So one thing that happened since we had that discussion literally this last week was there was this new congressional bill passed that is attempting to close the loophole that the service academy players can use to defer their enlistment into the branch of their choosing or whatever they train to be, to get into the NFL draft. And the significance of that is that for the first time in a long time, there is a service academy player projected to be in the first round of the draft in Andre Carter, who's a defensive end for Army. And so this closing of the loophole that is now going to President Biden's desk to sign would prevent Carter from being able to partake in the draft, and he would have to wait till after his service is over to pursue his dream of the NFL. And the loophole was proposed by a congressperson from Wisconsin. Good for nothing. So, but that person said, quote, the current people within the system would be grandfathered. So it still sounds like Andre Carter would be able to request a waiver if he was able to get drafted, and then he would have to serve after his career, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But goes kind of back to our point that in this modern era, this is now a further disincentive for anybody who's wanting to get to the NFL at some point to go to a service academy, right?
Yeah. Yes, I think you're correct. But I also look at, let's be realistic here. I don't think that many folks were already going to service academies with the intent of playing post-college.
Yeah, and I bet there's probably no such thing as a transfer portal when it comes to either in or out. Like you go there, you're kind of sort of stuck.
Yeah, I gotta imagine there's probably some pretty nasty strings attached and consequences if you were to duck out. But I don't know. And by consequence, I just mean financially.
Well, I don't even know if there's I don't know if that counts as desertion, but probably not. But I'm not the foremost authority on that. But
no.
Yeah, I think at a certain point, Army Navy game is super cool, but I think at a certain point, they may have to bump down to FCS if they want to be able to compete with teams around them, because I just don't think they're going to, in the long run, I do not think they're going to be able to compete with the other programs around college football and the Division I level, which is kind of sad. But
no, and even at some of the best teams in FCS, they'd probably put the a whooping on some of the service academies too.
Oh yeah, NDSU made they get to go to Frisco again, or I bet you're so excited about that.
I was never like an NDSU hater when I was at UND, just because I felt like maybe it's because I'm not from North Dakota, so I didn't have that like in-state hate bred into me. I always actually rooted for the Bison. Sorry to my UND alum out there.
Yeah, they're just the state school to your superiorness, so it's whatever. Yeah, got to talk about the way the Raiders game ended. That's absolutely one of the wildest things I've ever seen.
We were mid-dinner watching it would have been the Bengals-Bucks game, and obviously that game was over, so I wasn't really watching. Michelle and I were talking, and I kind of glanced, and all of a sudden I saw Chandler Jones like running. I was like, when I checked my ESPN app when we sat down, I thought the Patriots had the ball. So I had to rewind it because James Brown was like, "You're not going to believe this." And I was stunned. I mean, that's got to be up there with top 5 ways to lose an NFL game that we've ever seen.
Yeah, I think that's what keeps us coming back to football is it seems like when you've seen it all, you eventually, if not maybe gets topped, but you get introduced to something that you just never seen before. And I could not, to my recollection, because I've seen a couple teams attempt an onside kick, and the team that recovers it just picks it up, runs, and scores a touchdown. But that's not for the win. I don't remember a time where a team, I don't remember a time where a team was attempting the lateral move when the game was tied. That seemed risky, and Bill Belichick was not super thrilled about that.
I still think that Jacoby Myers was just thrown off by the fact that he caught a lateral, and then he was like, "Whoa, we're doing this," and just decided to chuck it. Like, I think he even said that wasn't part of the plan. Like, there wasn't a lateral attempt built into the plan.
Yeah, I think Jacoby Myers is getting the lion's share of the blame, but I feel like some focus should be shifted to Ramondre Stevenson and going like, what the heck was that? Which makes it a little nervous.
At least a third.
Yeah, it makes me a little nervous because I have fantasy playoffs next week and I have Stevenson in my lineup, and I hope they don't just like take retribution on him by like taking him out of the game or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, to me, the craziest ending to a football game that I've ever seen was the kick six Auburn versus Alabama.
I was just gonna say I think the only thing that might top this as far as back-breaking change of possession touchdown would be the kick six.
Because like Hail Marys are cool and everything, and like they're super amazing when they happen, but they've also happened before, and they'll continue to happen going forward. I don't know if we'll ever see.
And the team trying to score is the team that scores.
Correct. I don't know if we will ever see a tie game pitch and catch scenario with no time left where the defensive team gets the ball and scores a touchdown. Like that, just in the same way, I don't think we'll see too many more kick sixes in our lifetime. So, especially now that most NFL kickers can at least get pretty close on a 60-yard attempt. So, yeah, that was insane. So, I guess congrats to the Raiders, who are still alive in the playoff hunt, and a significant blow for the Patriots. So, really good news if you're a Ravens, Dolphins, or Chargers fan after that one.
We can all agree that touchdown wasn't a touchdown, though, right?
Which one?
The Raiders' touchdown to tie the game. I think it was to tie the game. The one in the back corner of the end zone that they reviewed.
The Keelan Cole one?
I think so. Yeah, it was the Keelan Cole one.
Oh, I forgot to acknowledge you on Twitter. I'm sorry. You won the World Cup predictions. Congratulations.
I did. Yeah, no, the Keelan Cole definitely had his foot out of bounds. I did watch the World Cup final, by the way.
I don't know if you're a soccer fan or a soccer watcher.
I've heard that every single soccer game ends like that. That's
really?
Sarcasm. You just looked at me like I was serious. No, I know how insane I was. Yes, I understand how insane that was.
That is literally that was the best soccer game I've watched, and I don't want to say ever will watch, but it is up there for Well, it's number one for best soccer games I've ever seen, and it'll take a lot to knock that off. That was insane. So congratulations to Argentina and Lionel Messi on the World Cup, and congratulations to you for blindly picking them in your group of three. I am proud of you. Let's see what else we got. So yeah, I had mentioned that the.
Hey, no. We need to finish the whole Keelan Cole wasn't a touchdown. His foot was definitely out of bounds.
I just saw a photo of his first foot being inbounds.
Yeah, in the NFL you need 2 feet.
Well, I see his second foot's about to touch the ground, so am I supposed to get my tinfoil hat out here? Is that what's going on?
No, I just think the refs screwed it up.
The officiating at the Vikings game was particularly terrible, especially when the Colts fumbled and the Vikings scooped and scored and they blew it dead, which is an egregious error, which was also the second time that happened to the Vikings that game. There was a couple other.
I'm quote tweeting this at you right now.
There was just other really bad calls, and then there was a couple others in some other games. So I think the officiating is coming under quite a lot of scrutiny last couple weeks for sure.
The picture I sent you isn't the best one, but it's the closest one.
Yeah, his foot's in.
You think? I don't think it is.
You can see black. Oh, that's his toe.
That's his toe.
Oh, that's the photo that I looked at too. I'm like, oh, that is his toe. Oh yeah, there's no disputable evidence there that you can see black. No chance.
So maybe they wear those cleats on purpose.
Well, that's like in hockey, you tape your stick with black tape so you can't see the puck when you're trying to shoot the puck. The goalie can't see it.
Or Belichick used to tell his receivers not to wear bright gloves. Or was it receivers? Or no, DBs not to wear bright gloves because it would draw attention to pass interference.
I think that's just Bill Belichick hating everything. Oh, Drew Pine committed to Arizona
I think there's
State.
A point to that.
Well, no, but I think Bill Belichick just a general hater of everybody. But yeah, Drew Pine, former Notre Dame quarterback, has committed to Arizona State. What a weird change.
Interesting.
Imagine going from Notre Dame to Arizona State. I can think of like a different contrast of colleges. Weird. So, yeah, I guess from that photo, it looks a little sus. So, wondering how that's going to work. The Chargers pulled out a win over the Titans in a pretty big matchup. Herbert's throw to set them up into field goal range to Mike Williams down the sideline there is simply insane. So I know there's certain personalities out there who've been hating on Herbert for the last couple weeks, but I am not one of them. So congrats to the Chargers. I think they're gearing up really nicely at the right time for a playoff run.
Yeah, I had picked the Titans in our matchup because this just seemed like a very Titans spot to win a game where everyone's starting to doubt them, and then we were getting too excited about the Chargers, so it felt like a perfect Chargers letdown. Titans kind of come out of nowhere, but I was proved wrong, and maybe the Chargers will be okay in the postseason.
Yeah, maybe. Other relevance, so Lions beat the Jets. I think that's now, 4 in a row, 5 in a row for the Lions?
I think it's 5 in a row. We're like, no. 5 of their last 6. I think it is.
Good for them. Like still on the charge, and I think they're a team that nobody wants to face right now. So good for them. Like I said, the Buccaneers had they were up 17-0, and they just had the worst second half I've ever seen. Up there with the Colts, honestly. And the Bengals came back and won. So good for the Bengals. And then the Commanders lost last night to the Giants, which does have big implications and does put the Commanders a little behind the 8 ball now as we get closer to the playoffs. So Giants go to Minnesota next week, so I think we can all agree that we're going to be rooting for the Giants. Doesn't mean I think they're going to win, but
I will not be.
Why? Oh, you want? Yeah, whatever. I think I just hope the Rams win tonight so we can put this thing to bed.
Here's the deal.
I was going to say, we're going to transition into talking about tonight's game, so go ahead.
Here's the deal. Do I think that the Packers will make the playoffs? No. Do I think if they made the playoffs, they would win a game? No. However, having meaningful football in December is fun, And as long
Meaningless
as I can
football,
hang
it's
on
the Rams.
No. I'm not talking just the Rams. I'm talking wanting the Giants to lose. So as long as I can hang on to any like thread of this game means something, it just brings a little bit more enjoyment to my life, and you're not going to take that from me.
You would be an awful Bears fan, man. You would just hate it.
I know I would.
But, sub out Chicago for any team that's been in our situation for the last 10 years, and you would hate it.
I know. That's why I have so much respect for like Bills fans and Chiefs fans.
But that's just it. I mean, there's a couple.
But here's the thing: when you're in the hunt graphic, it's fun because there's this little magical feeling of the stars need to align perfectly, and we know our team's really not that good. But it's just fun to imagine and dream, and that's why we're sports fans, because it's fun to imagine and dream.
I have said for the last several years, maybe not so much this year because the Bears have actually been somewhat enjoyable to watch on a couple of occasions, especially on the offensive side, that my biggest joy from the week comes from watching Red Zone, which is all about football. And that's where I usually get my joy, is just from watching. I just love the game of football. Like, when we got invited to the Colts-Vikings, I didn't care who won or lost. Would I want to see the Vikings lose? Sure. Do I care that they won? Not really. But it was such a cool experience, and I just love the game of football.
So I have a hot take. Well, it's not really a hot take. It's just it's kind of funny. So when you look at the playoff graphic, do you think it's more exciting to see your team as like the 4th seed or to see your team as the 8th seed in the hunt graphic after they've won 1 or 2 games? Like right now, you're the Lions. You're not in the playoffs. Is it more fun to look at that graphic as a Lions fan or as a Buccaneers fan?
Well, there's nothing fun about being a fan of the team from the NFC South. I think it's kind of cool. It's kind of like you're looking at it as a Lions fan. You got that Jaws theme in your head. I mean, it's kind of cool, especially when you're on if you're looking at the Lions and the Commanders and they're stacked on that graphic. Like, Lions fans would be like, oh, yeah. And if you're a Commanders fan, you're like, shit, we could have been a whole lot better if we won last night.
Because you can convince yourself, too, that, yeah, man, we're going to be that team that no one wants to play because we're going to sneak in. Like, I don't know. It's just fun.
That's what I'm doing. Man, we're going to be that team with the second pick in the draft, and we're going to mess some people up next year when we spend money on free agents that we don't need. Yeah.
I can't see past my nose, let alone think that far in the future.
Don't worry. I'll do all the thinking for you when I'm looking at the inscrutable – I don't even know what word I'm trying to say. The ridiculously bad contract situation the Packers have to sort themselves out here in the offseason when they convert everything to bonus. So it'll be fine, right? Salary cap's a myth, but
So I don't want to talk about the draft now, but I have a hypothetical for the draft that I'll ask way down the line because I don't even want to get into it now.
That's like one of my biggest pet peeves, by the way.
Draft hypotheticals?
No, just hey, I have this thing that I want to tell you, but I'm not going to tell you right now. Instead, I'm going to tell you 2 months from now because now I'm going to be thinking, well, what is he?
Yeah, we're gonna get it. We'd get way too deep in the weeds on it. We don't have the time nor the bandwidth, nor do the people care at this point. But I do have to say, it has been very comical for me to watch all of the Packers run social media hype up the fact that it's going to be like 10 degrees and we're supposed to get a couple inches of snow tonight, when less than 11 months ago, we scored 10 points in a very similar game. And then you go back the year before that, and we lost in the playoffs at home in the cold. And it's like, I get it. It's the whole frozen tundra. It's the mystique of Lambeau Field. But can we not act like it's a big deal for at least the next couple of years until we maybe prove that it's a big deal? It just brings up bad memories, hence why I tweeted the Aaron Jones picture today.
Yeah, I am a happily married man, but Alex Smith looks really good. Not going to lie.
Hey, 2 other thoughts on this whole cold weather thing. One, do you know how much PTSD that Buffalo Bills Miami game gave me?
Over that?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. What do you have PTSD over from the Bills?
The Bills Dolphins game, because it was snowing at night, and it just made me. It brought me back to a dark place. Second thing, what were we just talking about before that?
How he's related to it is.
Oh no, related to cold weather. You got to tell me it's pretty funny that the Vikings are doing a whiteout game for Christmas Eve, and all their hype videos are like snow and ice and cold when it's going to be a nice, cozy 71 degrees inside that dome.
For the Giants game?
Yeah, you got to go check out Vikings social media. They're doing a whiteout
Which
night,
is
and they
equally
want all
funny
fans
because they
to
have
wear
to
white.
go to Green Bay and to Chicago the next 2 weeks.
And all of their hype videos are like winter storm warning for the Twin Cities metro area. And it's like, okay, guys, come on. You play in a giant enclosed fake ice cube.
To be fair, hang on a second. To be fair, we are going to be under a winter storm warning here this week. Shout out to my wife. Happy birthday on Wednesday when it's going to be a high of 0. And the second thing is that you can knock US Bank all you want. I'll go ahead and die on the hill that it's one of the top 3 football stadiums in America. I think you have to
die on that hill, my friend. Go ahead.
You haven't been there to witness it. I wouldn't say Lambeau's not a top 3 field unless I've been to it. But
yeah. I've only been to a handful of NFL stadiums.
Right. You can imagine if you've not been to a stadium, you can imagine which ones are good and which ones are bad, but you can't really say until you've been there. So I can imagine that going to a game at Arrowhead is probably super cool. I can imagine that going to a game at Lambeau is super cool. I know that going to a game at Soldier Field sucks because Soldier Field sucks. US Bank Stadium is insanely cool and really well built, and yeah, I'm going to die on that hill.
So just looking purely at stadium construction and fan experience, taking away all historical context of like Lambeau, Gillette, or not Gillette, that's a new stadium, but Lambeau, Arrowhead, take away all that stuff. I feel like you'd be hard-pressed to tell me that Atlanta, L.A., and I should have another team in mind. Oh, and Las Vegas wouldn't be better than Minnesota.
I would. I think yeah. I mean, Minnesota's definitely in the conversation of those 3. I'd say Minnesota's above Atlanta for sure. I don't know about LA. I mean, LA is the newest and glitziest and whatever. I also didn't know that LA, obviously LA has an enclosed roof. I didn't know their sides were open. That's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea
until
cool. Like 2 weeks ago.
I will hold judgment until I go.
I think you should come to a meaningless Vikings game next year. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Not a Packers one because I don't want. Oh,
I would
and
be so
also
angry.
Also hated the fact that we had to do like 7 Skull chants in the 4th quarter. Like,
yeah, dude, I would hate that. I might just go stand in the concourse during those.
Well, I do like foals. Like I say foals when I do mine.
I'd probably just hold my hands like this.
What, safety?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm seeking safety.
So like it's cool when they do it at the first half when they start the game. It's cool when they do it and they come out of locker rooms. But then we didn't need to do it 7 or 8 times in the 4th quarter / overtime. So
hey, you know what I'm going to do? And I'll report back. My cousin is a massive Vikings fan, and he's been to a ton of games at the Bank and Lambeau. And he'll give me like an unbiased.
Well, I know what he's going to say. He's going to say that the experience in Lambeau is better, but the stadium in Minneapolis is better.
Yeah.
But report back to us next week.
You're probably right.
Report back to us next week. Moral of the story is, depending on what vibe you're going for, each stadium can be super cool if you give it a chance. Except Soldier Field.
I think that's, and maybe that's where my bias comes in, is to me going to an NFL game is so much more than just the stadium. And I know it's unique because of the whole like small town Green Bay atmosphere, but that again goes back to why I think Buffalo and the Chiefs are so cool to me, is that it's the whole game day experience is much more elevated than some of these stadiums that are buried inside of big cities like Minnesota, like Atlanta, like Houston, I'm sure. Like the parking lot, stadium district, all that stuff, I just think adds so much to the game day experience that in my grading system, again, me personally, that would all get factored in it, and I just don't think Minnesota would have that.
Yeah, if you're going purely on a good place to watch football, Minnesota would be top 3. If you're going for the full experience, maybe not.
Okay.
But
you're right. I do need to get to a meaningless Vikings game just because it is not too far away.
Yeah, and the tailgate scene in Minnesota isn't that great because there's not a lot of places around the stadium to do it. So, yeah, you're right. Like, I haven't had the true tailgating NFL experience quite yet. Same with Soldier Field. I mean, you have to park far away and then walk through concrete districts to get to Soldier Field. So, I'm still keep my fingers crossed I can get to LSU, Florida next year and then get some real tailgating in. So, I think that's it. What are we on? Week 15? Good Lord. Week 15
what's your
in the books.
Predictions.
What's
your prediction tonight to make yourself look really smart?
I will say 23-7 Packers.
My prediction was 23-17.
Okay. So you have a little more faith in Baker than I do. I just think the Rams are not built to play in the cold, so.
They're not. I just have lost all faith in Joe Barry.
It's really nice to see Allen Robinson come back to Lambeau Field on a shitty team. He's been kind of used to that over the years. So, and then also, quick shout out, Merry Christmas, everybody. By the time we record our next episode, it'll be post-Christmas. Got any fun plans?
The last thing about tonight, make sure you're on Aaron Donald watch.
Is he playing?
I don't know. Oh, no, that's right. Damn it.
Why? Were you going to brag about your no-name 7th-round pick dusting on him?
No, I just wanted to see him get really angry because he's done it twice against the Packers. That was all. I just wanted to see him get mad. Damn it. Christmas plans, yeah. Traveling the entire great state of Wisconsin yet again. In a good way. Our family's spread all over, so we visit people far and wide and get to see a lot of great people. So even though we're on the road a lot, it's a good time.
One of these years we'll have to get to the cabin after Christmas and then put you on our stops.
Well, here's the other thing. My company shuts down from the 23rd until January 3rd. So I also have plenty of I don't want to say free time because we're going to be doing a lot, but other than work things to do.
That's not even PTO, is it either? It's just like free time off?
Nope. Yep, just paid holiday.
Dope. All right, well, whatever you're doing this Christmas, hope everybody has a safe and fun time with friends, family, or if you just prefer chilling. Hope you have fun chilling, but have a safe holiday, and we will check in with you after Christmas.